store had opened about an hour before. Now I'm staring at a model of an implement of war. Then my hands start to tremble and my heart began to pound. It was the weirdest looking model plane I'd ever found. But they don't design them like that anymore. They just don't design them like that anymore. They've been innovating for 100 years. But I'm wondering about some of those engineers. Were they geniuses or were they smoking crack? They put the tails out front and the wings in the back. They don't design them like that anymore. They don't design them like that anymore. And now I wind up buying every single kit. 'Cause you never know if they're gonna reissue it. They don't design them like that anymore. No, they just don't design them like that anymore. No, they don't design them like that anymore. They just don't design them like that anymore. They just don't. No, they don't. No, no.
Range control, we're doing a voice test. Range control, this is a voice test.
Like that anymore. They just don't. No, they don't. No, 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 no. They just don't design them like that anymore. Well, the
Can't
hobby
impress
store
somebody
had
except
opened
watch
about
this
an
using
hour
a generator for power.
before.
It's all right.
Now I'm staring at a model of an implement of war. Then my hands start to tremble and my heart began to pound. It was the weirdest looking model plane I'd ever found. But they don't design them like that anymore. They just don't design them like that anymore. They've been innovating for 100 years. But I'm wondering about some of those engineers. Were they geniuses or were they smoking crack? They put the tails out front and the wings in the back.
All right, that's the 7 o'clock hour.
They don't design them like that anymore.
On. Dun, dun. Do. Oops. Okay, logo stays on. Livestream comes off. There we go. Crap. Having a little trouble with the camera, so let me just remove. Yes. Plus video capture device. Okay, and that will be integrated camera. There we go. All right. Now let me just trim this back down. Camera froze on me. It happens sometimes. Best thing to do when that happens is just, go ahead and turn it off and disconnect it and just completely reinitiate it. Now let me send that down to the bottom. Just a second here. 1, 2, da, 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 da. Okay, that's done. Turn that one on. There we go. And put it here. There we go. All right, and we are operational. Well, how's everybody doing this evening? Hope you guys are all well. Trey's good to see you. Lance, everyone else. Lance, sorry I didn't get a chance. I was in Tallahassee, but if I'd known I was going to go to Hobbytown, I'd have given you a shout. Maybe could have met there or something. Anyway, I'm forgetting something here. Okay, somewhere around here I had a glass so I could drink like a dignified human being. I guess I'm going to sip out of the bottle. Just water tonight. All right. Oh, house fires are scary. Yeah, I've been in one. They are not fun. Well, folks are still checking on. That's great. The computer's running on my generator. Hardcore, brother. Let's see. Okay, so you must be around Jeff72. It's midnight there, so I'm guessing you're somewhere around England. 2400Z. Washing, shoveling. Okay, I've been people been sending me pictures 2 feet of snow. I'm glad they're getting some modeling done. Thank you, Roy. My day went okay. I didn't get much modeling. Actually, I did. In fact, we'll just make that the first thing we'll talk about here. I just happen to have some pictures standing by. All right. I did get a little bit of work done on the ramp for the X13. Let me just roll that up, get the rest of the stuff out of the way. Ow! You can see all that flash and everything on there. This is the Mach 2 kit. And this thing has been fighting me every step of the way because I had put so much primer and so much paint on that thing. Of course, I had to scrape the surfaces before I could put the stuff together, glue any new parts on. I did get them on, but I've got to use the thick Tamiya glue because it's hard to get them to sit flush. Everything's a butt joint, and that stuff seems to give the strongest bite once you let it harden. It's in there hardening right now. These pictures are actually taken only about 2 hours ago. And I had hoped, foolish me, that I would get this thing done today so I could show it to you guys, do the big reveal, but that's not happening. But since the X13, they managed to finish it without making, a total train wreck out of it, I really want to try and make that the ground equipment look good. But this this ramp that it lands on, the big platform is basically one piece. So they go, that's okay. Well, why couldn't they have made the framing member at the bottom like one big stamping? But it's not. The lower part of the chassis is all separate I-beams. The part on the left, it's all separate I-beams that have to be cut and fitted. And no matter how much I tried, I never really got a good fit. And after a while, you get frustrated with it. And everything, just about all the things that go on it are butt joints. So about the time you get them hard and you get them on there, you start moving things around, you wind up knocking one off. Had to trim out that little wheel. That's the adjustment wheel for it. And it's just one thing I recommend if you ever build one of these kits. The God's Hand snippers that I've got have become really handy at clipping off some of because they're so fine. On some of these finer parts, have been real handy at snipping off some of that flash without breaking the part. Because you'll see here in just a second, if you look on the left of the X13, it's that white ladder, and those parts are already broken. That's what I had to work with. I'll probably put some filler in there, but trimming that thing off was a nightmare. Trimming all these parts off was a nightmare. And a lot of the flash on there is really thick, and the parts are really thin. So it's just been, hey, Burning B24, it's just been a real trick to get that done. But that's where it sits right now. Maybe finish it tomorrow or the next day. The left side there, that broken piece on the runner is supposed to be the part that the airplane hangs on. So I'm just going to use some wire, detail it out later. But to be honest, I've kind of hit the frustration point with this kit. I'm in a dangerous place where you're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, but you're kind of they just get it done attitude, and that's never a good thing. The launch platform is both a launch and landing base. It was designed to both take off from that platform and hook back up to it. And I didn't think about downloading any footage, but you can go on YouTube, put Ryan X13 or X-13, and you'll see the footage. They had that little hook under the nose, kind of like a reverse carrier trap. And they both land on it and take off on it. And of course, they also had the option of putting wheels on it, but they did not retract. And it was really more of a proof of concept aircraft than anything else. And so anyway, that's where building went. But that's not the only thing I got done today. Let me show you something else that I got done today, which was really, really, really cool. You guys may know that I bought a paint rack for $10 at Hobbytown in Tallahassee. And so there it is in the Tarbus. And because I had all of these paints in different boxes scattered all over the place, all this other crap, I was in all the solvents and everything. And by the way, that's not the full paint rack. Some of it, a piece of it went in my wife's work area, and that's the empty shelf. Those are just like clear coats and stuff. I've got them separately. But look at that. I've got floor space. I almost took some video of me dancing in the Tarbus to show you. Look at all that floor room. There's nothing cluttering up the floor anymore. So I've got, room to operate. And that's the most room I've had in that place in a long time. Oh, yeah, Gary, the molding is beyond crappy. But on that X13. And I'd heard about the Mach 2 kits, although some folks told me that they'd actually gotten some Mach 2 kits that weren't that bad, but most people have told me ones I got were bloody nightmares. And so hooray, I got a paint rack now, and it's actually starting to look like a place that a human being can get some work done. And you'll notice those models on the left, I actually have them in here with me. We're going to talk about those in a while, but I'm super thrilled. It's really been cold here, and even though you'll notice to the right of the paint rack, I have that little heater, which, don't worry, it's turned off there and unplugged. But that little heater makes it really heats up give it about 30 minutes, and it warms the whole Tarbus right up. Give it a couple hours, even the paint cans are starting to get warm. So, hooray on that. Now, that's not what I wanted to. There we go. Put our little man up there. Our wee little man. And let's turn this back on. Okay, so let's something. Okay, what is that? Oh, that's what we're going to talk about next. Anybody recognize this off the top of your head? All you car guys, especially those old timers, the ones who build vintage kits, may recognize this. And I was going to take a bunch of pictures, but I decided just to bring the item in here with me. But this may look familiar to you. And that is okay. I'm getting a little out of control here. That is this. This is a vintage kit that was sent to me by a glue trooper. And let me see if I can get the little desk camera going here. Okay. Wrong one. Put that back. Okay, video. Oh, there it is. Nope. Up one. There we go. All right. Let me put the light on this a little bit. Turn it up some. I thought we'd talk about some of these old kits, and you guys may recognize the vintage Revell Ford Ranchero. Now, apparently, is Steve here? I don't see. Anyway, Steve's Model Mania knew the story on the molds for this. Apparently, this was later. This was another Ford vehicle, and I forget which one it was offhand. It might have been the wagon, but they cut the mold up and modified it to make this kit. So if you find one of the other ones, then it's yes, it is motorized. We're going to talk about that in a second. In fact, I'm going to pull it out and show it to you. But this kit, and I think it was this one, since they had to cut up the mold of the station wagon that it was made from, the result is that if you can find one of the old station wagons, grab it, because they're pretty rare. And oh, thank you. So I thought, and I've got a few other kits over here for us to look at, but I thought you guys might get a kick out of this one, because I know a lot of you guys are vintage ones. I'm probably going to send this one to Andy's hobby headquarters for his museum that he's putting together on kit models, because I really don't want to, you know, this is one of those kits that I know. So now he got a huge estate full of vintage kits, so he may not need it. I need to check with him. I got a few models picked out for him, but I thought we'd take a look at this, because I know a lot of you guys love these old. Oh, thank you, Gary. I know a lot of you guys love these old kits, so I thought we'd just pluck it out and take a look at some of the stuff in it. So it has chrome parts. You know, I love how they show you half the parts on the side of the box. I mean, that's actually really cool. And they show you more parts on the other side of the box. Nice touch. Because we're going to be talking about Revell and Lou Glazer in a little bit, and some of the guys that were the icons in the industry, which is what we frequently talk about in this channel, because we're kind of a history-oriented channel. So first we have the decal sheet, which actually clean. It actually looks surprisingly good. I could clean that up. I'd probably put some couple of coats of clear coat over it, maybe some Restore, just to make sure they don't break up. But you could possibly, with some Microset and Microsol, you might get away with using these. I think any serious modeler is just going to copy this. Problem is, of course, you can't print in white, so what you do is print it and then cut them out. You print the outlines and then cut them out on white paper, which could get tricky. But they might be a little too yellowed. Something I learned recently, this yellowing, this browning, that is a form of rust. Apparently the chemical compound that makes the decals up has the same reaction to air over time that metal does. So somebody was trying to explain to me the chemical part of aspect, and of course, went right over my head. But given that these things are probably 56, this kit probably came out in the early 60s. So, yeah, this kit's about 60 years old. That's actually pretty impressive. And just to feel them, of course, it's back when they were pretty thick. Wow, you can feel the raised. You can read these by Braille. So let's. Whoa, there goes my backdrop. My fancy backdrop. I thought an Aurora catalog would make a nice little backdrop there. 25 cents. 1967 catalog. That was sent to me by Glue Trooper. And, you know, those old catalogs are great. So let's see what we got here. Put this kit over here for right now. We're going to talk about the Faller kit in a minute. All right. First, we have the instruction sheet. Let me try not to make a mess here. So, this is pretty freaking detailed. I mean, this is not like one of those old crappy Palmer kits. There's a lot to this. And since this probably predates George Tota's side slide injection molding technique, of course, the body comes in three parts. You have all the side components that have to be glued together. And this is, for those who haven't done it, this is a hard way to build a model car and make it look right. There's actually quite a bit to this kit. Look, there's a lot of detail in here. In these instructions, you guys might remember Mike Machat did an entire video dedicated to the artwork on the instruction sheets. You have to remember that an industrial artist had to put every one of these together. These things aren't just, well, with a professional company like Revell. Just the instruction sheets alone are pretty impressive. And I just saw something, which is, this kit may actually go back to the late 50s. Look at this. You want glass? You got to cut your own styrene. You got to cut your own clear plastic. This is before, I guess, back in these days, it wasn't uncommon for parts. I remember buying models that didn't have clear parts. I think I told you guys recently about the little Hawk C-131 Samaritan that I bought, and it didn't have any glass. And I thought they'd left it out, but apparently and they may have. Maybe the Hawk. If any of you guys ever built that little Hawk C-131 Samaritan, little twin-engine Convair, if you had glass parts, let me know, because I bought it and it didn't have any, and I just assumed it wasn't going to, which I don't know. But and of course it's got the electronics wiring and everything, so that's. And this is 2 full sheets of instructions. This isn't a quick and easy day build. So let's take a look. Here's the motor you were asking about, still sealed. And this looks like the original factory sealing where yep. And let's see if you can see that. I don't want to take it out because it's kind of an artifact, but it seems to, yeah, it spins freely. I will guarantee you this motor still works. 60 years in a plastic bag, and I will virtually guarantee you that this motor still works. Hey, Rob Altus, how you doing? And you've got the components of the battery, and since they're sealed in plastic, I don't really see much in the way of rust or anything on them. I know it's a little hard to see that there, but oh, here's one of them. That brass looks pretty good, or copper. And okay, now everything's bagged with some. The bag has been opened. Here is what looks like the tailgate. And there's a little bit of flash on it, as you can see. But the molding's not bad. Looks like a one-sided molding, though. There's your knockout pins, ejection pins. So, typical of that era. Well, I'll tell you what, as long as the bag's open, let's go ahead and look at the parts, but I want to be really, really careful. Okay. We got the chrome parts. And wow. That looks pretty good. Those solid hubs right there, I can literally see myself in them. You can see my whole entire bedroom reflected in them. That's some heavy-duty chrome covering on those puppies. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. All right, let's take a look at a few parts. Well, there's this part of the suspension. Okay, here's what we all want to see. Here's one of the body halves. Slide that right there. There is nothing wrong with that, other than it's a 3-piece unit, you know, and you have to put the sides and everything on separately. But the actual quality of the molding, that would hold up. I think that would hold up today. Again, these molds worked faster than the later side slide molds. But of course you wind up with these rather difficult to build kits. But there's nothing wrong with that. The side slide system, of course, you know, goes into things, and that's why we have the 3-dimensional bodies that are molded, you know, one huge body with the sides, everything already on. So much easier to build model cars today, but and have them look really good. But part of me wants to build this just for the challenge, and part of me doesn't want to because it's such a vintage kit and it appears to be complete. There are a few little blemishes, but nothing serious. Ranchero. I don't want to go digging any more parts out of here because I don't want to start knocking. These are parts that are already separated from the trees. But you know, there's a reason Revell, you know, they had a good reputation for a good reason. They worked hard to earn it. And all right. Okay, I'm putting it in the wrong box. It needs to go in that box. There we go. Paperwork, decals, motor. Drop the motor down in there. Okay, so the decals. Now that I jiggle the parts around, they haven't settled back down. Oh, that's okay. I just realized something. This chrome sprue has a very large part that sticks up. Careful. Steady, lads. Steady. Has this large piece that sticks up right here, and it has to point down, not up, when you put it back in the, get the bag to get the box to properly close. There we go. All right. Apparently you just flip the thing on and it just goes. It's not like an RC or anything. Although with modern servos, it would not be hard to convert this. With a micro servos, you could make it steer pretty easily. Imagine it would make a really easy to probably convert that into a slot car. It would look cool going around the racetrack, I gotta admit. Sorry guys, while I was doing all that, I wasn't checking any of the comments. Let me see what you've been saying here. Oh, Steve, you're here. Good. So while we're on that, talking about Revell, I wanted to mention something that I was having a chat with Glue Trooper earlier today about, and that's Lou Glazer, who, of course, ran Revell. And, you know, in almost any business, and by the way, to a certain extent, even in the military, there's always this big gap between different departments. For example, in the military, you've got, you know, what we call operations, or what today they like to call the warfighter, which is, you know, the guy out there flying the plane or pulling the trigger, driving the tank. So those are operations guys. You have the logistics guys that have to supply them, who live in their own world. And you've got the command, who has these lofty, okay, we're going to do this. And to them, it's all stuff on a map. And these people operate in different worlds. In business, you have marketing, you have manufacturing, you have product development with kit models, you have product development, and of course you've got the bean counters, the executives, and supercar. Hey, I love that, Steve. So Aurora's idea of product, we talked about before. And Andy had told me about this. Aurora's idea of product development or of market research was, hey, that looks cool. Let's make that. And sometimes it is just that simple. But the Revell, Lou Glazer he was the man. I mean, he ran the because one thing I was talking about was that Aurora had Gia Marino and Abe Shikes and a couple other folks at various points that were, you know, they kind of had to agree on something. Gia Marino kind of ran operations. Shikes did the business end of stuff. You had at Monogram, of course, you had Reeder and Besser, and Reeder ran the floor. Everything had to meet his standards. He was a pretty exacting guy. Apparently, by everyone I know that met him, worked with him, he was a good man, easy to work with, but he was it had to meet standards. And Gia Marino was kind of the same way, although if you compare Monogram to Aurora, everybody's got their own standard, right? So, but not so at Revell. At Revell, it was Lou Glazer, and all the way. So good or bad, whatever Revell did, good or bad, Lou owned it. And there's a lot of stuff that came out that never saw the light of day. I wished had the Batcopter from Aurora, the X13 from Revell. You know, these things were patterned, and they didn't go into production, and it's just too bad. Of course, they had to make that decision in real time then. As I mentioned earlier, Lou had just lost a bunch of money on the F-102 that came with all the parts because it was a near $3 kit back when people made $25 a week. And then we laugh today, but it's a $30 kit today. Anyway, I mean, would be. So it broke the... You know, if it wasn't $1.50 or less than $2, odds are a kid couldn't get it. And so Lou had a natural eye for what would sell. And you know, I've talked about this before. There were three very different personalities at the big three. Now, of course, you got to remember the AMT and NPC and these guys, PMC, which is another company. They're all making the demos for the dealerships. That's where they're making their money. The kits kind of came later to them, but the Revell was Lou Glazer was so worried about getting bought out by somebody getting gobbled up that he wanted to make sure he had a really big catalog. And even though Revell was known as the airplane company, they really did make a lot of cars, which we're going to be talking about something about in relation to that in a little bit. Now, I'm not talking about Airfix because they were kind of off in their own world. And while Cove was running Airfix, he was the man. But they were in a different market. I'm really referring to U.S. companies. Aurora's attitude was, we got to keep making stuff. We got to have the biggest catalog, and we had to be the first ones to market. So they didn't take a lot of time to do a lot of research. They got some pictures, some drawings, and whoop, off they went. The guys at Revell were more meticulous about it. The guys at Monogram, Besser and Reeder, they had no interest in having the biggest catalog. They wanted to be known as the best. They wanted to be the Cadillac company. Thus the name Monogram, which they literally came up from when they saw one of, I think, his mom's monogrammed handkerchief. They figured, well, monogrammed, when people have monogrammed stuff, that's a sign of class and being upscale and very Cadillac. And so that's how the company got its name. Whereas Revell got it from it used to be, Pacific Plastics or something. I forget what the name of the company was, but they actually had a company contest. And I'm not really 100% sure how Aurora got its name. But I think that they had it before they were into making models. So it was Keeler that got Revell in the car business. I knew that Keeler had a big influence on that. Jim Keeler, by the way, a little bit good news. Jim seems to be doing better. Happy to report. We're all pulling for you, Jim. Jim Keeler had, won that contest, and when he interviewed with Royal Glazer, he still talks about it. And it's of course, you're talking about the goddess of kit models, and to be in her office and you're 18 years old, first time you've traveled away from home, and you're being offered a job, you might as well have had Athena up on Mount Olympus ask you if you wanted to, work for Zeus. I am not worthy. But then none of us are. So, Sarah Jane noted Revlon. The Glazer's Plastics Company, which had made a lot of money during the war making like radio knobs and stuff, injected stuff. He did get a big contract with Revlon, and there was Revlon actually has a couple of connections to the kit model business. Not only did companies that made a lot of Revlon products, not really that big a shock because it was injection molding. Not only did companies that made stuff for Revlon eventually go in the kit model company. If you remember Aurora, what was it? Diker, who wound up taking over Aurora in the early 70s. He came from Revlon, and there's a whole story behind that people have told me. Apparently that was never mind. So anyway, but I have personal experience with a boss at a relatively large company that was announcing, let's call it, new product before our company had the physical assets to cover his sale, but the marketing department ran with it, because marketing departments run a lot of companies, including kit model companies. And because the marketing department has a big say on what gets developed. And you got these development guys that they may be in tune with what's going on, but they still got to sell it to the marketing department, and then the marketing department's got to sell it to the accounting department, because they're the ones that, hey, the money, only so much money. So it's a thing. And a lot of us go, why didn't anybody ever make this? Or why didn't anybody? Well, I'll bet you whatever it is you thought wanted made, somebody at some point probably raised their hand. Hey, we should make this, and showed some nice drawings, but they couldn't get it past the front door. The Weirdos, a classic example. And I'm trying to remember, was it Campbell? Gosh, I need to go back and watch my own videos. You do all this research, but it just pours out of your head after a while. Right now, I'm still working on Faller, which we're going to be talking about Faller here in a minute. I'll just put that right there. I actually have Faller mostly written. I just, too many irons in the fire. So, Keeler started with the Revell out in the kit car business with the 56 Ford pickup and the Mickey Thompson Challenger. He also made contact with Ed Roth to do their kits. Yeah, that's right. He in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think that Jim flopped on Ed's Roth's couch for a while, you know, and he's one of the grand poobahs of, if you're a car model builder, you know, Tom Daniel, Ed Roth, and a few of these other guys. I'm trying to remember who it was offhand. It's not going to come to me, but the Weirdos that Hawk put out, and I want to forget it was Campbell. Anyway, they'd done some artwork, and I think they'd done a build up or something, or I forget. But anyway, they couldn't get it past the boardroom, and they're like, nah, we're gonna make this crap. Well, he left, and apparently he did this on purpose. He knew they were gonna have a big sales meeting with all the reps. Now you have to and Steve, I know, has some experience in this, so chime in on this. Sales reps, the people, the buyers who come to a company and buy stuff for Walmart or any big chain, they have a pretty good bit of pull because they're the people who buy your product. Well, apparently they saw these. I think it was the Weirdos, and no, Ed Roth was Rat Fink. I don't think the Weirdos were Ed Roth. I think they were Campbell, I believe. But anyway, the point is that they saw these things, and the executive was like, "Oh, that's just something one of our idiot, people came up with." And like, wait a minute, these are cool. We could sell these, and they wanted them. And he managed to get it in front of the eyes of the actual buyers, and that was some pretty brazen stuff. And I'm not mistaken, I think he kind of went up and cold called him on that. Gosh, I gotta go back and look at that now. Nick Keeler lived with Roth for a few months when he moved to LA and worked for Revell. That's right. And by the way, despite Big Daddy Roth, with the weird beard and being part of the car culture and everything, he was, and sort of giving that hippie vibe and that wild man vibe. Believe it or not, he was actually, as I understand it, he was a very devout person of faith, and was actually, he'd created this image, but he was actually a very much a believer and a great guy. And Jim can't say enough great things about him. And he's the only person I know that had that close a relationship with him. And I've talked to Jim a couple of times, and Jim's a straight shooter, so I take it on faith. Right. The Weirdos came out in '63, and these are I believe it was the Weirdos, the ones I'm talking about. But it was one of those things that one of the creative product development people came up with the idea, couldn't get it past the board, but managed to get in front of the eyes of the buyers. And they turned managed head when they said, "Look, if you make it, we'll order it." And, okay, that's music to our ears. So, John Ashley, the view from the lake is. Oh, by the way, John Ashley mentioned Steve McQueen was the coolest on Sand Pebbles. Just completely shifting gears and zipping off on a tangent because that's what we do here. Steve McQueen, as you guys probably know, had been a United States Marine. I believe he'd been in an armor unit. Supposedly he got in trouble for souping up the engine on his tank and blowing it up. But who knows how much that's apocryphal. But anyway, but his exposure to the military and everything. In the Sand Pebbles, if you ever know the way he carries himself, the way he walks around, almost a little bow-legged, apparently some old destroyer men from that era said that he actually had the real honest-to-God look of a sailor of that period, that he walked like one. And I was like, well, he was in the Corps, he was, So they really thought that he had captured the essence of men in the Navy at that time. Just bought my first real, thanks to... Oh, well, okay. The X1, oh, great. Don't forget to send pictures when you're done. I don't know of anyone that makes a kit of the Sand Pebbles River gunboat, but they might. For some reason, I seem to have a faint recollection of one. Somebody jump out on Scalemates. Don't forget, though, that boat was of Spanish built. He pointed out in the movie that they got it from the Spanish. Anyway, so get back to what we were talking about earlier. Is you got these people at odds with each other. You got the marketing guys, and you've got the finance guys and everything. And every one of us, if we had a choice, if you want to get a kit model company to make something, you've got to get the marketing guys on board with it, because the product developers, they'll make whatever you tell them to make. And what was that old saying by an unknown toy executive? Your dreams are our nightmares. You have to remember that one of the worst things about it, and it's even worse than the kit model industry, because this is a hobby and craft industry. This isn't a toy industry. Toy industry has to know 2 years ahead of time what people are going to want to buy so that they can get it into production. Kit models need a year. This is why when when movies are in development, they're trying to get the rights to them ahead of time so that the model can get out before or when the movie does. Because if you wait until the movie's already out and it becomes popular, now it's going to take you 6 months to a year to get to market. It's not as long as it used to be, but I think the general rule of thumb was in the day they greenlight a project to it being on the store shelves, they used to ballpark a year. And now, but I wanted to cover that because a lot of people have been asking who makes this or why didn't anybody ever make that. And I thought we'd talk about that briefly just because it's still a business and it has all of the, I don't want to use the word it has all the administrative and organizational issues that you have in any business. And I would say that the marketing department kind of runs it. So I wanted to look at this faller because I'm working on the video or the script for faller, and just put that right there. Now, Faller did not make a lot of kit models, but they did make some. And they're mostly known for, they aren't familiar with them, they're a German company, which started right after Zavala. And they primarily make like buildings and scenery and stuff. And they make like amusement parks and stuff to go on model rail layouts or landscape rail layouts. And they range everything from the slightly cartoonish up to the extremely detailed. But they also, for a while, made a series of models. And I thought we'd look at this because I took a peek at this. And again, this was sent to me by a glue trooper. And this is a little different than most models. I mean, it is a plastic kit model like we're used to building. And they had a bit of an inventory. But we'll start off with the instructions. And I like the subject matter, CH46. But as you can tell, it's a pretty basic kit. And you'll notice there's an absence of well, no, I take that back. There are rivet lines and panel lines and everything on it, but actually I'd say a bit over scale, but I'm not surprised. It was very common back then. But there's the bulk of the kit right there. Here's the other parts tree, and it does have an interior. There's the floorboard, and there's your rotor blades. It does have the clear components, the clear parts. And I think that's a stand. Oh, there they are. This is the, here's the windows, and they are individual windows. But here's the fun part. There's the front glass. And I think, yeah, you have to paint. I'm going to check the instructions real quick and make sure that I was thinking there was a part that went on front of that, but yes, there is a piece that goes on front of it. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So, whoop, careful. You have the glass part, and then you have this piece that goes on front of it like that, which should make it a lot easier to paint if you want to pre-paint it and everything. But anyway, I mean, it is a plastic kit model. There doesn't seem to be any... Oh. The hole on top where the rotor blade is supposed to go through is plugged in by flash on the aft side, but it's visible on the other side. Yeah, not a big deal. 30 seconds with an X-Acto knife or a Dremel. Yeah, part fits very well, as you would expect from fine German engineering. And interesting subject matter, though. Not super detailed. The sponsons are completely solid on top and bottom. So, but still, perfect for a layout. The weird thing is they make all the stuff for model train layouts, but this is not model train layout scale. So I think they were actually just trying to get into the kit model industry. This is a 1:100 scale. So, But since I'm getting ready to do at some point to do the Faller, I thought that'd be an interesting to look at. The kits aren't overly complex, but they're a nice representation for a 1/100 scale. I don't see any problem with them. Thick, heavy plastic, by the way. Now, I wanted to build this for the Karmer build, but I never got around to it. I have yet to build a Johan kit. And this is on my short list because I want to be able to say I've built a Johan kit. And again, the Sport Phaeton was sent to me by a glue trooper. And it's kind of weird now when I go to a car museum and I see something like, oh, I've got a model like that or of one of those. And does that thing just not exude class? I mean, 31 Cadillac, very Dalton Abbey. Wonder why Fowler didn't call it the Vertol. Vertol was gone by 1961. Okay. And they called it the Vertol. But I'm not sure when this kit was produced. So it may have still been Vertol when they did it. Or VT107. But maybe they didn't get the memo. That could have been lost to translation. If you ever want to see some really nice footage of one of these for New York Airways, watch the movie with Clint Eastwood, Coogan's Bluff. The beginning and the end, he flies in on New York Airways. And it going in and out of the Pan Am building and everything. And there's also a really good advertisement for him that somebody posted online that was made by the company back in the, judging by the cars, I'm going to say the early to mid 60s, looked about 63. And these things actually had in the 60s, they actually had at New York Airways real quick aviation tidbit. Okay. There is no such thing as a multi-engine helicopter ATP, airline transport pilot rating. In fixed-wing aircraft, the airline transport rating, you have single-engine and multi-engine and seaplane. But with helicopters, there's just the ATP. Because helicopters fly the same way they have one or two engines. Because, like in a helicopter, except for a piston engine job, you don't adjust the throttle. The power is set and it's automatically governed once the engines are turned up. When we went from the UH-1 to the Black Hawk in the Army, a single engine and multi-engine, in the UH-1, you had a collective that had the throttle on it. But once you started the engine and it locked in position, and then you just pulled the collective up and down to go up and down. In the Black Hawk, you had two engines, so there weren't throttles, there were power levers. They were overhead, but once you locked them both in place and had both engines turned up and going, the collective had this pistol grip on it. It didn't rotate because the power was up on the roof, but still, it flew exactly the same. Because a helicopter is whether it's got one engine, two engines, or even in some cases 3 engines, they're pretty much all turning and they're automatically governed, at least in turbines. So the FAA said we just need one ATP that covers all helicopters. So if you had a helicopter ATP, it didn't matter if the helicopter had one engine or 2 engines, you were covered in both. What's really rare in helicopters is an instrument rating. Now, the Army and the military requires helicopter pilots all be instrument rated, but most civilian helicopter operations don't really. A lot of guys with crop dust in them or do power line, that kind of stuff, they never fly instruments. Their aircraft aren't even instrument equipped. Speaking of which, I was coming back to Tallahassee, I saw a couple of Hughes 500s doing the power line thing. It's weird to see a helicopter's right up there against the power line. Anyway, New York Air, though, their guys were instrument rated because they were flying an airline. And one of the things they had, which was really whiz-bang for the time, was, and I only know this because I watched that video on their advertisement, it had an early moving map. And when I say a moving map, I don't mean like an electronic device like we have with the screen. It literally had a map, and it scrolled it. And it had a pin that was marking, it just dragged the map under the pin or moved the pin across the map. But I was like... for the early 60s, that was I think it was INS, Inertial Navigation System based. So that was pretty whiz bang for the 60s. And you laugh at it today because you got this little arm out there with this marker sticking down on the map going marker. But like, that's still pretty freaking cool. Take care, Slugo. Anyway, what scale were the men for the Rocco miniature tanks? I think those were HO scale, which is what, 187 or 196. God, why can't I remember that? But anyway, That's a 1-to-100 scale. So, and I noticed a lot of the Fowler kits, I think, were Fowler kits were 1-to-100. By the way, the Fowlers were the brothers. I think it was Ernst and I forget it. I've been doing the research, but again, zero retention. But they were around for a long time, and but the company's still around, and they quite the little business there. But getting back to the Johan, I don't want to open this because it's still taped up. I'm afraid of losing some parts. But this is 1/25th scale. I'm looking forward to building it. And everyone who's built Johan kits has told me that they really fit well. They're really good kits, and I'm looking forward to it. But I know there are a lot of Joe fans out there. So I just want to let you know that I am planning to get to this at some point. And it is on my short stack. My short stack being about 2 dozen models. Including this one, which I just got yesterday from Admiral Harriman Nelson. And this one I thought we would open up and take a look at. F-26 HSI where had the same scrolling maps. Oh, okay. I know that the Harrier had a system like that, but it was projected on a screen, but it was a physical map that was moving. And but it didn't have the marker, it just had the map. But still, that's pretty cool. F-106, man. Tell me that thing didn't look like it just flew off the set of Johnny Quest. I just love those Convair Deltas. Actually, the Delta didn't go away. The Mirages are still Deltas. In fact, except that they've got a different shaped windshield and everything. A Mirage looks a lot like a trimmed down F-106. And what was the F-106 in service for? 29 years, still the fastest single engine fighter. Mach 2 point something 6 or something. I mean, that thing would smoke. And but it had a single stage afterburner. And you'd be riding by Tyndall Air Force Base when they're launching. It seems like right here is boom, and you just see the tail end light up, off they'd go. So let's take a look at the Flying Sub. And then we're going to get back to cars. Tonight I want to talk a little bit about dragsters. Got something interesting for you in a little bit here that I was just able to cobble together. Flying Submarine Ultimate. Oh, I disagree. Every airplane that went down in the ocean was a flying submarine. Oh, that is so wrong. I'm going to pay for that one. All right. And of course it has the fully detailed interior. I'm glad they had the good sense to make this thing in yellow, because I think we all know the issues I've been having with painting yellow today. Today I was out actually with the brush, touch it with the yellow acrylic, touching up some spots, and it's looking a lot, the X13 is looking a lot better. Mike, I don't know if you saw earlier, I was showing some pictures of the progress on the X13 ramp. While I'm getting this open, I'll let that roll real quick. And it's, God, that kit is horrible, but it's starting to come together. It's, ooh, 2-color system. All right, I like. Okay, so here we go. We'll start off looking at the instruction sheet. Oh, it's got more detail than I thought. It's got the engines and everything back there. Yeah, you can do a pretty cool diorama with this. Just make a bay from the submarine, have like a panel missing, so since it's got engines, you could have like doing maintenance on it or something. Anybody that's owned a boat knows how much maintenance they are. Anybody who's owned a plane knows how much maintenance they are. Can you imagine the maintenance on a flying submarine? I mean, saltwater corrosion everywhere. That doesn't look like it should be. Okay, I don't want to say it doesn't look like it should be too difficult. That's when you say that, and that's the next thing I know. A few days later, here's the got this. That's an interesting interior. I don't know if I'd call this a day build, but it's now we have the clear parts, the 2 big windshields, and they look pretty good. I'm glad they made them, you know, I mean, of course it was the design of the ship, but with big windows like that, it makes sense to have an interior. For once, you'll actually be able to see the interior that you went through all the trouble to build. Here's the back spine. We have a lot of parts molded in gray. And this looks like really clean. I don't see any flash or anything. It looks clean. There's a detailed instrument panel, which is kind of a joke, the one thing you won't be able to see, but of course I'll paint it up just because I'm a pilot. And I want the instruments to look cool. When I was a kid and it came time to paint the interior, I wanted the interior to really look cool, because you guys remember, like with this show, you also had Irwin Allen's, I think, The Land of the Giants. And I was like, well, if I'm ever in a place where I get shrunk down, you know, because mind you, I was a kid, I was like 8 years old. If I ever get shrunk down real small, I want the inside of the airplane to look good, so maybe I can fly it. Sky Captain, I don't remember, it must have been that good. Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, or whatever it was. And then, of course, the large components molded in color, which I think is going to make life a little bit easier. I may paint it, but it's going to be a lot easier to paint over yellow with a different yellow. And I don't, yeah, the Aurora issue, and I'm pretty sure this is a monogram original. I don't believe I never built the Aurora one. Let me change glasses and see what the copyright date on this is, because I know Monogram got a lot of repops back in. No, this says Morton Grove, Illinois. Copyright 1964. So I don't know when this particular run was made. The box is in really good shape, but I don't know if this is from the mid-60s or if it was a late. It looks like, judging by the Monogram logo, I'm thinking that's a later repop. But I could be wrong. Let me see if there's a stamp date on it. Nope. Because if you recall, the 148 scale Monogram fighters that I built probably more than anything else as a kid, the Messerschmitts and the Mustang, I just kept, I don't know how many times I had the ME-109, the FW-190, and the Stuka, and the P-51B. Those are the ones I just seem to gravitate towards. But they were, oh, rats. I felt something flick off my finger. I think it was one of the landing. Oh, there it is. Hold on. Oh! Everything's okay. I found it. Looked right down and it was there. That never happens. I think that was all my good carpet karma. Okay, put this back in the box before I start dropping parts. A live carpet monster feeding here on Max's Models. I monitor what I'm doing on the phone here. I got YouTube coming on the phone just so I can see, like, if it's also the only way I can leave a comment if I want to. The way OBS it upgraded, and now I can't leave comments on it. Yeah, but that's not the monitor. Okay. Oh, John here. Good, John. Okay, everybody, John, you missed earlier. I was talking about this kit, this vintage motorized kit, and it comes with an electric motor, and I was hinting it might make a good little slot car. Haha. Since it's already set up for electronics. Electric shave. Okay, raise your hand if you remember that commercial. Electric shave. Let's see. It's never too early to feed the carpet monster. And when Max's Model starts fabricating kits, it's going to come with a throwaway part. So when you open the box, you just throw it on the carpet, and then when the monster's been fed. All right. Now, real quick, I have something to chat about in a little bit, but I have to take a real quick break. So I'm going to flip something up here. If you guys want to refresh your drink or some whatever, or get rid of the old one, now's the time to do it. I'll be right back.
Thank you. an hour before. Now I'm staring at a model of an implement of war. Then my hands start to tremble and my heart begin to pound. It was the weirdest looking model plane I'd ever found. They don't design them like that anymore. They just don't design them like that anymore. They've been innovating for 100 years. But I'm wondering about some of those engineers. Were they geniuses or were they smoking crack? They put the tails out front and the wings in the back. They don't design them like that anymore. They don't design them like that anymore. And now I wind up buying every single kit. 'Cause you never know if they're gonna reissue it. They don't design them like that anymore. No, they just don't design them like that anymore. They don't design them like that anymore. They just don't design them like that anymore. They just don't. No, they don't. No, no. They don't design them like that anymore. They just don't. No, they don't. No, 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 no. They just don't design them like that anymore.
And we're back. I had to refresh. Whoops, come back here. Stay. Had to refresh my beverage of choice for the night. All right, so while I was running to refresh my beverage, I went ahead and grabbed this, which was hardened in the kitchen, but it's hardened now. He says as the parts fall off of it. This is the part I was griping about. Every single one of these beams is a separate part that has to be cut and fitted. And as you can tell, they don't like to hold on very well. But finally getting, and of course that moved on me. Oh, good God. You know, these parts, it's like they never really harden. The box, there's no slot pins or guide pins. This little black, okay, it's a little hard for you to see with that background. There is a little black box right here. And it, on the actual thing, there's a ladder. There's actually a guy standing in there. And I'm sure it's for access to work on the cables or something. Anyway, there's no tabs or inserts or alignment pins. Everything's just a butt joint. So just the corner of this thing is glued into place, and it's just would it have killed you to make a couple of alignment pins? I mean, really? But you know, I should have grabbed the X13, but it's actually starting to look like something now. So hey, Gabriel. Now, wait, did I see a Biowing F86? Probably. A lot of those were Photoshops. And by the way, that's the Dreamberry 2 Daryl that did that. So thank you, Daryl. So, I forget, Daryl, did I write the lyrics for that one, or did you? Because I know you've done a lot of them on your own, but I've written the lyrics for a few. I tend to forget which ones. I know I wrote the lyrics for Fine Skill. I'm in Fine Skill Modeler. But he does everything else. So here's what I wanted to talk about tonight. I want to talk about kit model dragsters. Okay, so let me turn that off. Now, you guys, of course, I'm sure, are far more versed. A lot of you guys, I know, a lot of you motorheads are way more versed in this kind of stuff than I am. And I don't know if I ever built a kit model of a dragster, but I was doing a little perusing on ScaleMates about that, because me and another glue trooper were talking about dragsters earlier today. And I realized that Revell, you think of Monogram as the car kit model company, but Monogram in the upper center, there are a couple of Monogram ones. It seems like Revell did more dragsters than just about anybody else. Aurora only did one, that T dragster on the left. Hawk did a couple. Atlantis is still putting some out, and hopefully they'll be putting some more stuff out here in the near future. I'm hoping that them and Keeler can get some of the Keeler's customs made. But even KB on the far right, KB Hobby even made one. Airfix made one. Airfix had two, but one of them was an NPC kit. In fact, I think it was Brute Force, the one to the left of it. Just, so Airfix, I think that supercharged dragster was an Airfix original, but that was the only one I could find that Airfix did. KB on, at least, and of course, mind you, this is just scrolling through ScaleMates. There were a couple of specialty companies that had done some. Now, having not built a dragster, or at least not that I can recall, I'm going to assume they're extremely difficult to work on because, it's probably pretty obvious. But what's surprising was they're not a very well represented genre of kits. There's just, even Revell didn't make that many of them, a half dozen. Now, Mongoose and Snake, those I remember as a kid. I'd buy those again today, but those are probably the only ones that I did. And it's, in a way, it's kind of a shame because dragsters are I watched, I think it was a Curious Droid did a video on dragsters, and I didn't appreciate how much the KB was a slot dragster. Okay, well, there you go. All right, I didn't even know that. Obviously, we are way out of my wheelhouse, but I know you guys are into this stuff, so I figured this is going to be more for you guys to drop information on than for me. But one of the things I was informed of today and did a little research on is I knew some women had gotten into drag. We all know, Connie, what's her name? Shirley Muldowney and a few others. And of course, everyone knows Danica Patrick because, they get all the camera time. What I didn't realize was right here in Florida a couple of years ago, a young girl, Katerina, 24 years old, was driving a jet dragster in Sebring and was killed. And there was a really unusual accident with Leia Pruitt. And I put this together so we could talk about it a little bit. But, man, that looked like an aerodynamic structural failure. The car, everybody wants a flying car. Guess what? They just invented one. Only the wing comes off. But watch this thing. It goes airborne. And that wing, wow, man, Jiminy Crickets. This is about the time, I don't care who you are, you've got religion. Now, apparently, she had the good sense to blow the drag chute, or I don't know if it blew on its own. I'm assuming she fired it. And that, I really think, but is that her leg hanging? No, that's not her. That's a bottle of some sort. But she walked away from that, by the way. Sadly, Katerina Mahler did not. She was in that jet dragster on the right, and it crossed the lane, and I think went into the wall on the other side. She actually hit a piece of timing equipment in the center lane, I think. But on the left, that's just, wow. So I'm just thinking to myself, these are these are kits that could be made. I mean, I don't think anybody's making them. It's a niche market, but, you know, show the ladies a little respect here. You thought you had a bad day at the office. That's what happened. 8,000 horsepower bends the frame. You realize that's 4 times as much horsepower, 7 times as much horsepower as a P-51 Mustang on a frame lighter than its fuselage. And I get dirty underwear just watching it. Woohoo! Man, there's an e-ticket ride for you. Anyway, I just thought you guys might enjoy that. So, getting back to the kits, maybe they're just not hot sellers. I assume drag racing has a strong following, but when I was a kid, I know all the kids loved anything that went fast, and they loved watching drag racers. So I'm not really sure why they weren't better represented. Quite certain it had to do with sales. I mean, maybe they just didn't, turn out to be that great sellers. But I'm going to have to build one at some point just because now I'm curious. Okay. Have any of you guys built model dragsters? Which ones, and what did you think of them? I mean, they got to look cool on the shelf. Good God. I know the mid-mounted engine jobs, there were some real issues getting the cockpit out in front, some mostly steering issues getting the cockpit out in front of the engine. But once I got that resolved, although I'm not sure today why it's like the guys can't decide. Some of them have the cockpit in front of the engine, some have it behind. I'm sure everybody's got their rationale. If I remember right, I seem to remember some dragsters had 2 engines on them. And that may just be childhood memory, playing tricks on me. Oh yeah, the funny cars? Absolutely, good God. I can remember when they used to use those things for advertising stuff. With Joey Chitwood's, they used a bunch of Chevettes to do their trick driving and everything was, and then they would use the funny cars to advertise all kinds of stuff. And I mean, a funny car is a dragster, I would think. But I don't know. Is dragster actually a class, or is that just a moniker we call high performance straight racers? Or because I'm not exactly sure what makes a dragster other than the front ends can't stay on the ground. What did you do, Granny? What a story. Well, I used to fly cars. Yeah, the Don Prudhomme snake. Yeah, mongoose and snake. And I would say Prudhomme is probably the best representative of all the dragsters that I saw. I saw several Prudhomme kits. If you look at the repops or body styles from the 70s, no. Well, let's face it, the 70s was probably the last decade that cars really had individual style. Yeah, okay, so a funny car is a dragster. All right, that makes sense. No, Dom, yeah, I do remember Carlitz. If you guys are into dragsters, you're going to love Curious Droid's video on them, because he gets, I think it was Curious, I didn't realize, I mean, I knew that you didn't get a lot of time out of a dragster engine. I didn't realize it pretty much had to be rebuilt after every race. And he talks about what goes on in there. It's just incredible. But technology still manages to come out of them from time to time. Of course, somebody from another planet would probably sit here and watch us drive a dragster and be completely, why are you doing this? Because it's cool. It makes noise. It goes fast. Snake and mongoose. Oh man. That was, I remember Snake. I was in about the 4th grade. Oh man, that stuff was even advertised on TV. I think they had Hot Wheels and everything else. John, who was it that made more money off of his the race driver that made more money off of his deal on, was it slot cars or die-cast cars than he did actually racing? And I actually flew, I was telling some folks earlier today, I actually flew with guys who used to fly for the NASCAR at various teams, Dale Earnhardt, Roush, a couple of others. I actually knew one of Roush's pilots. He flew on us fairly regularly. Roush had a bunch of old MGM Grand 727s, and Roush Racing. And good God, they extended the runway over at Concord, North Carolina, just to make room for his airplane so he could get him in there because he didn't want to be stuck at Charlotte any longer. And anyway, they were telling me that, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know this. These guys who race, a lot of them, they will race in the morning. Then they'll stick them on the company airplane, and this isn't the lap of luxury. It's just a quick way to get them around. Sometimes they'll pick them up by helicopter, fly them to the airport, drop them in a turboprop, fly them from Talladega to Charlotte. They'll do another race, and then they'll fly them someplace else and do a night race. This is why they get these young drivers. I didn't know a human body could put up with that kind of abuse, because you think about the adrenaline and the effort that goes in, and the exhaustion that goes into racing a car. And these guys are doing multiple races a day, and they're not really getting paid that much. It's gig work. You get paid for the race. And I'm assuming you don't even get to keep the purse, that if you win, it goes to the car's owner, I would imagine. But how do you make a small fortune in racing, start with a large one? I don't know, except for maybe DEI, Dale Earnhardt Industries. Dan Gurney, that was it. Yeah. And but they make and of course every team has a very different personality. I know that the guys who worked at DEI was talking about how secretive they were, and the guys who worked for some of the others, like, it was more of a family business. But and of course they get these kids off the dirt tracks and everything that show some talent, and they just beat the crap out of them. And they're not really technically classified as athletes, but for my money they are. And yeah, racing, aviation, or the boat business. Just want to make a small fortune, start with a big one. But the thing about it is, though, is when I look at what goes into dragsters in particular, I can't think of anything out there other than a shotgun shell that has, more energy per ounce and a shorter service life. I don't know if you would say service life, but I mean, the race is just over so quick. But in that time, I don't know how many G's a driver pulls in some of these things, but I think when Mahler was killed, that jet car, I think she was doing 287 miles an hour. You think about the acceleration on that thing. Jesus, that's impressive. I didn't see any jet car. By the way, I was looking too. I didn't see any jet car dragster kits. I'm sure they're out there, I would imagine, but that's a hole in the market, man. And I imagine that Jim Hall, that's who I was thinking of. Thank you, John. Jim Hall made more from models than any other driver. Yeah. 112, sir. Yeah, not the digger, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Uncle Sugar gets a slice of the pie. My model cranked 300 yards. Huh. That was the two smokers. Well, that was just something I thought you guys would be interested in. And we never talked about dragsters here that I can think of in the past. And I mean, that's kind of sad, because I'm guessing that a dragster driver, for the very, very short time that they're racing, they're probably in more extreme danger than anybody else out there. I know they're just going straight, but obviously, I mean, I don't have to talk about how easily things can come apart. And the speeds they're operating, the narrow track of the tire, everything about that thing just reads disaster trying to happen. It reminds me of the old saying about what's the definition of a helicopter? a machine that from the moment you start it to the moment you stop it is desperately trying to tear itself apart. And I just see that, and that's what pops into my mind. This thing's trying to destroy itself from the moment it's cranked. And occasionally it succeeds. Good one. Alfred's asking, what dragster kit became the X-Wing? I don't think it was a kit. I think it was a toy. But that would be I watched that thing on the Star Wars toys, the toys that made us. And they showed somebody still has the original concept, the X-Wing, which is a dragster body with the X-Wings on it. I don't know. But I'm kind of surprised some dragster driver hadn't made his funny car, or some funny car driver hadn't made his dragster look like an X-Wing. Let's be taking a sudden stop that does, yeah. Or whatever you hit along the way. And, oh, Lordy. Well, that just isn't getting old anytime soon. Let's see. So, guys, I think that was all I had. What you got going on? What you want to talk about? I'm going to start reading some comments here. Oops. Had the evidence. Move this away from the camera. Very good. Yes, it's light beer. No, I haven't seen. Has anybody here actually built any dragster kits? 8 dice, heavyweight. Yeah, I think I have seen the rocket-powered semi-dragster. That's a kind of a different... Star Wars, speaking of that X-Wing dragster, that the Star Wars toy saved Kenner. And John Force. Just emailed pictures of an ARL-44 heavy tank. All right. Let me see. Light beer, Canadian water. They had a thing on The Simpsons where some Germans were buying the power plant from Montgomery Burns, and Homer sees them in the bar and asks him, so what do you think of our beer? He's like, yeah, it tastes like Zavata. Okay. That's got to be out of Girls in Panzer. Bum, 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 ba da ba da ba 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 ba. That's a nice job. I'm going to give you guys a quick sneak preview here of one of our submissions to the Karmer build. Oh, by the way, I got an email from Tom Daniel today. He was asking about the Convair 990. Apparently he wasn't familiar with the airplane. He'd seen a picture of it. Wanted to know a little bit about it. And that happens to be one of my favorite airplanes, even though they only made about, 16 or 18 of them. But, so he's doing well, I guess. Okay, guys, here's a sneak peek of one of the models from the Karmer build. And that's got to be Girls in Panzer, the French school. But, ARL 44. Let's just put a bigger turret with a bigger gun. That's nice. That's cool. I'm going to have to look that tank up. I'm not particularly familiar with it. Mini the Mongoose and Snake, front and rear dragsters, one Snake, one arm. I remember the Army one. Ram Charge and a few garlic kits. To Tommy, Moon Eyes, and a few more. Okay. Yeah, the 990 was give you guys and by the way, there's about a 9 or 10 minute video done by Mustard. I don't know if you guys have ever checked out Mustard's website, but I highly recommend it. He does his own CGI, and he's really good at it. And he does whenever he does a video. He does these just really good CGI animations with them, and they make the and he talks and he does his research, so it really looks good. Now, there was an airplane called the Convair 880. Where's my keyboard? Oh, there it is. Convair did not try to get in to the aviation business with the biggest. They wanted to go with the fastest, and they came up with Convair 880. It was a little smaller than other airliners, but it was faster, and it like any new aircraft, it had some issues. And I think it was American Airlines wanted something that went even faster, and they came up with a follow-on, the 990, which they made even fewer of, the Coronado. I think they all ended up over at Spantax. But they just commercially weren't viable. They burned too much gas. They didn't carry enough people, and they didn't really have enough range. But they were really fast, and a lot of people think they were one of the most beautiful airliners ever made. And let me just put this image up here for you. This is the 990 that went to NASA. Very rakish. They look kind of like a 707, a little smaller. And Convair had a lot of success in the airline business with the prop jobs, or 240s, or medium-sized airliners. But when they got in the jets, they wound up losing supposedly the 880 and 990. And mind you, we're talking 1960s dollars, cost them about $500 million. It did not go well. But obviously, these are the same people who made the B-58 Hustler and the F-102 and the F-106. So I was, be honest, kind of halfway to something. I didn't go with a Delta wing just to look cool and go fast. But there's those bumps on the back of the wings. We're talking an airplane that went so fast. It had, those are, what do they call them? Not shock buffers. Forget the name offhand. But they're aerodynamic blisters that help control the airflow and the shock wave. And I believe they dampen the shocks. The 880 didn't have them, I don't think. They had to have them on the 990 because it went faster. And they wound up putting fuel in them we got this void space. Let's do something useful with this. So put extra fuel in it. The thing guzzled gas. Well, the reason TD was asking me about it also was because the NASA markings. And NASA, that one, by the way, I believe, that was NASA's bird. And I believe it's at the Mojave Air Museum now, or at an air museum in Mojave. So it's one of the survivors. And Elvis's plane was a Convair. I forget it was an 880 or 990, Lisa Marie, but it was a Convair. Delta operated them for a while, not very long. They just drank too much gas, and they were just under Mach 1. The airplane was a true transonic jet, and transonic is classified between Mach 0.8 and 1.0 or 999. At 1.0, at that point you're going supersonic. But anyway, and it operated in that range. Unfortunately, and this is just the bizarre math of physics, when you get past about Mach 0.8, the drag on an airplane goes up on a really steep curve. Now, once you get past about Mach, 1.1, it starts coming back down again. But there's that nether region in between where the drag is really bad, and that's where that airplane flew. Had they been able somehow to make it a Mach 1 airplane, it probably would have had better fuel efficiency, which seems counterintuitive. But Elvis had an 880. Okay. Never sandwiches. Okay, here's your trivia question. And I got this from a documentary, so if I'm wrong, blame the History Channel. When Elvis was living in Vegas and doing all the shows there regularly, and he lived in the hood, he would have the cafeteria cleared out so he'd go down and eat lunch. And he had the same thing every day. And this explains why he had a heart attack at 41? What was his favorite lunch? Yes, I agree. The era of the area rule, Richard Travis Whitcomb and the area ruled fuselage. Just to give you guys a quick supersonic aerodynamics 101. The area rule states that drag increases with cross section, and I'm probably butchering this, but Mike, you can probably correct me on this, but One of the reasons the early Century Series fighters, early F-100 and F-102, they just couldn't seem to push those pigs past Mach 1 without diving. No one understood why. They had plenty of power. They were clean. They were swept wing. And then Richard Travis Whitcomb had broken the code. It took him a little while to convince people. But what he realized was the fuselage was at its fattest where the wing was at its thickest and longest. So as the air flowed over the airplane, it was basically having to spread out and cover this massive area. And what he realized was where the wing has the most area facing the wind and is at its thickest, if you taper the fuselage in, from the physics point of view, you have a smaller frontal area. The airplane's more streamlined. This is why you see some of the later warships have the long scalloped bows on them. They learned that they same thing, they push to the water better. They create a low pressure in those scallops. So the peanut butter, bananas, and mayonnaise on white bread. Oh, God, I'll just answer the question. Don't make me eat that. Now this is a supersonic aircraft thing when you're subsonic. So if you ever notice, the early F-102 has this bulbous fuselage where the wing is thickest and biggest. Later on, to offset that, they put these blisters on the tail to give it sort of a fake area rule, and it squeezed through Mach 1 to get up to about 1.2. But the F-106, the follow-on, has this long, rakish, tapered fuselage. The F-16s, I was saying, well, they don't need that today. They got so much power. I was taxing an old Beech 1900 by an F-16. I looked at F-16 is area ruled. You notice behind the cockpit, it gets real narrow, and then it flares back out towards the rear of the engine. F-15s, they kind of do that with the engine humps and everything. They realize they still work area ruling into some of the modern aircraft. Now they're so freaking overpowered, it's not as big a deal as it used to be. Stealth is the big thing, but they've got enough raw power and efficiency to bludgeon through it. But you look at a lot of the later fighters that area, and today still the Mirages and stuff are still doing that because it works. It's free speed. Yeah, the 105 was the F-10. The CF-105 had a lot of things worked out, and let's don't get going down that rabbit hole. We'll start up again. The B-58. I actually have my B-58. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Training aid. And yes, I'm wearing my pajamas, okay? Okay, try not to knock anything off. Something went over. All right. Whoa, mule. I still have the lowest production standards on the internet. Proudly so. Okay, here's what I'm talking about. You will notice that the fuselage narrows right here where the wing has the most surface area. Wasp wasting. Okay? This is bulbous. This is narrow. And as a result, as the air flows over this thing, it sees this big area, hits the wing, but as the fuselage gets smaller, from the point of view of aerodynamics, it sees the airplane as smaller because it's looking at, like, if you were to slice this airplane in half right here and just look at the front, it's looking at how much area the air has to go around. And if you slice it right here, and right here, you wind up with a fairly consistent frontal area. And I tell people, imagine if you were to cut a slice out, drop it in a pan, and melt it into a medallion, and it made a circle. And then you did it right here and did the same thing. The medallions would be close to the same size. And that's how physics sees the airplane. And of course it looks pretty too. Yeah, the T-38s and F-5s are very prominent wasp wasting. A lot of aircraft, even the MiG-21s, and a lot of them, same thing. And, only 37 990s and 65 880. I knew it wasn't many. And boy, they took it on the chin. It's sad because I went on Elvis's plane, the 880, and what was surprised with the cockpit of the airplane, you're used to these gigantic 5-inch dials and everything that the airlines have, but that cockpit was kind of small, it was very tight, and the instruments seemed to be physically a little bit smaller than on some of the other airliners. And of all the airliner cockpits I've been in, my favorite's the L-1011 from Lockheed, and that was just a beautiful office, and it had the little ladder right there and the 2 jump seats, and you stand up in it, and very modern. And my favorite gizmo was that little thumb wheel, looked like a little thread bobbin sideways, and they just roll. They didn't have the trim that you just rolled it with your thumb, and the airplane just trimmed, and the airplane would just make these very gentle, delicate movements. It rode the turbulence really well. My other favorite one is the Boeing 727. And you just sit in that thing. You're just, the instrument panel is over your ankles. I mean, it's way out there, and you got those gigantic instruments. Like, it's an airliner. You can smell the tobacco and coffee stains. Excuse me. Which is why the San Saba Songbird is a sobriquet of preference. That's the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. That was funny. That's the fellow from Brother, Where Art Thou? And I gotta dust that. Was there a shag carpet? No, there was not shag carpet, but it was nicely appointed. It did have a bed in the back, and before you ask, there was a seatbelt diagonally across the bed just to stay with an FAA standard, which I'm sure never got used. But he didn't actually have the airplane that long before he passed away. And to answer your question, the question I asked her earlier was Elvis's favorite lunch was fried chicken that had been rolled in crushed potato chips before it was fried. They would flour it, roll it in crushed potato chips into the fryer. No wonder the man had a heart attack. All right. For the fly was the L-1011. Yeah, I have never heard anyone that flew the L-1011 say a cross word about it. In fact, the same guy who did if you go to Mustard's channel, he not only did the Convair 880 and 990, he also did the L-1011. And the L-1011 in a way suffered the same fate as the Convair product. A technically fantastic airplane, but it lost them a bunch of money because they didn't sell enough of them. And it was more expensive. It is almost too advanced for its own good. So DC-10s tended to rule the 3-engine marketplace simply because they were just more economical, even though aerodynamically and technologically speaking, the L-1011 was leaps and bounds beyond it. But the DC-10 did the job, although they did have some serious accidents. One, the engine went over the wing, and a couple of them, the cargo doors blew out. So it was a very buggy airplane, which early wide bodies tended to be. Oh, the Matt Helm movies. Oh, yeah. I remember the one where he could, anything he said in the microphone was printed across the taillights. I mean, it was a Thunderbird. He goes, if you can read this, you're too close. Anybody watch the 24 Hours of Daytona? I did not. Yeah, at least he didn't pass and let on the airplane. Yeah, that would have been, yeah. I did not fly the DC-10. I flew a KC-10 simulator at March Air Force Base. And to be honest, I found it drove around the traffic pattern like a drunken walrus. I mean, it was one of those airplanes where you turn the yoke, 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4, and then center it, and then the plane kind of, okay, corrective action. Just turn on the friggin' autopilot. But my least favorite plane, yeah. Well, if you want to know my least favorite airplane, look up something called the Christmas Bullet. Well, normally the wide bodies give a pretty decent a ride just as a virtue of their weight, but that's not guaranteed. By the way, I guess I don't need that anymore. Just to give us something more interesting to look at. There we go. Okay, Jeff, glad you were able to make it. I'll be wrapping up here in about 20 minutes. So the wife wants to watch The Gilded Age. By the way, there's basically the American Downton Abbey called The Gilded Age, which we watched the first episode. The second one comes on tonight. If you like Downton Abbey, you'll probably like it. The production quality is excellent. The costume and everything. The only thing that's, I would say, I don't even want to use the word wrong with it, is that Downton Abbey, they shot everything on location. And it has that authentic feel, the lighting. This was got a lot of external shots that are clearly, because they're like old New York, so it had to be CGI. So it's sort of un-Americanized. Indoors, just a little too well lit. Everybody's just a little too clean. You know what I mean? But still, worth watching. Old New York versus New New York. The old New York snobs won't deal with the new rich snobs, and you're kind of running into people that kind of like, God, they're all so obnoxious. I hope they all lose. And our families came over on the Mayflower. So they were the first illegal immigrants. Just trying to catch up on a few of the comments here. Yes, the DC-10 did toss an engine and a couple of cargo doors. There are there's still some DC-10s that are, the KC-10s are still in the Air Force, and the DC-10s are still working for like FedEx and UPS, and the MD-11s, which is not a DC-10, although they look alike. They also have what they call the MD-10s, which are basically DC-10s that were brought up to the MD-11 standard on internals, but they still have the DC-10 fuselage. Yes, this is the Convair B-58 Hustler. We were talking about the area ruling earlier. And one of the things I have to be careful of, now that I have people like Steve and Mike and John and others who know a lot about cars and airplanes and everything, I'm always afraid I'm going to get something wrong. I don't want to embarrass myself. Trust me, I don't need anybody's help embarrassing myself. I got that one covered. People always talk about, I would have loved to have lived in those days. I'm like, yeah, much before about 1940. I don't think so. No air conditioning. I mean, people are like, I would love to live in the Old West. Really? When was the last time you actually used an outhouse? I'm familiar with the fish salmon crash. Yeah, that was 1980. I didn't realize that's when it happened. Where was that at? Because Salmon was a very experienced pilot, but even an experienced pilot, no matter how good you are, you can't keep a broken airplane in the sky. If it won't fly, it won't fly. Yeah, the DC-10 crash was it was due to poor maintenance. I hate to say it, but it was. They had this very expensive lift they were supposed to use on the engines. They didn't have one, so they were using a forklift. And as I understand it, the engine was in position with the pins in it, but they hadn't finished mounting it. They had like one bolt in it, and overnight, they left it overnight. Overnight, the forklift lost a little pressure, and the engine sagged, and it broke the one of the bolts. And only like 3 bolts that hold that engine on. Of course, they're bigger than your thumb, but anyway, it was a real tragedy. And it also caused a bending of the flange that was underneath it, if I remember correctly. There are a couple of really good documentaries on that. Every airplane goes down to the chain of something. And the thing the B-58 Hustler was famous for, supposedly, was it needed, the way it was told to me was it needed 24 hours of maintenance for every hour that it flew. And it had, I actually did get a chance to have a rather lengthy exchange with a fellow named Phil Rowe, who was the backseater. He was the number 3 guy, the bombardier in the B-58, because it's at 1, 2, and 3, and they all had those pods for ejection. They lost a lot of them in accidents. A lot of it had to do with the improper heating of the pitot tube. And this one, my brother, when he had this model, he clipped the pitot tube off. You know, I talked about a while back how putting metal pitot tubes, stab poking people really was a thing. He is a lawyer, and he had it in his office, and he had a couple of people that almost walked into it. So he was like, you know what, I better cut that off. The B-58 had a very pronounced pitot tube. Well, anyway, they had a lot of issues with proper heating of them. And if that pitot tube, everything in the airplane ran off of it. And if it iced over or something, you had real, or malfunction, you had real problems. They lost some planes because of it. But anyway, he was telling me that one of the biggest problems in the B-58 is that they did their weight and balance up at Mach, not using trim, but using fuel. Had a bunch of fuel tanks, and they pumped the fuel all over the airplane to... And they did. I think they did the same thing in the Concorde SSTs, Delta Wing jets. That was a good way, because if you start using trim, you start imposing a lot of load on and drag on the airplane. But if you can do it with weight by moving fluids around, you know, that's a really clean way to adjust your pitch or your trim. And he said sometimes they would have pump failures, and they couldn't move fuel from one tank to another, and they only had so long before they'd land before the airplane would get out of weight and balance. It was very mechanical, electromechanical, and very buggy. It was just so complicated. The control systems alone were super complicated. Talking about moving the payload to the outside of the airplane. This enormous tank on the belly had it was a nuke with a slipper tank around it. So you kind of had a 2-for-1. To get extra fuel out of the airplane, they had to carry an external fuel tank. You remember, they talk about it was a Mach 2 airplane. That was a dash speed over the target. You didn't cruise at Mach 2, and you were going to cruise at Mach 2 with all that parasite drag out there. So they had I'll just hold it up here. They had this nuclear weapon that went on here, but they had this is the fuel tank, okay? But inside the fuel tank was an external, could carry an external nuclear weapon. And the fuel tank was a slipper tank that went around it. When they jettisoned the fuel, they could jettison off the slipper tank and still have the much smaller nuke on board. Or they could have an internal, they had a bomb bay so they could have the weapon carried internally. Convair, when you look at the nose gear assembly, you're like, the nose gear sticks down here. How did it get around this fuel tank? Well, it scissored forward and came back, and it was. I remember standing under B-58 at the Pima Air Museum, looking at the nose gear, like, that is bizarre. And you realize the guys at Convair were either certifiable geniuses or certifiable lunatics. The jury's kind of still out on that one, but they were not afraid to think outside the box, that's for sure. I was one of the tank. You see, they had different payloads. One of them's a nuke, one of them's a tank, and one of them's both. And the way you can tell the one that's both is there's a little hump on top of it, because the nuke has a different dimension than the tank. But you can go out and see documentaries on it online. Yeah, there was also talk about turning North American. It talked about turning the XB-70 into supersonic airliner, which Lindbergh, I think it was, actually made a model of in TWA markings, and I almost grabbed one off of eBay. The guy had already built it, but he didn't want that much for it, and I thought it was just so cool. But I was like, nah, if I didn't build it, I'm not going to buy it. Yeah, and I believe the Concorde had to pump fuel back and forth also. The faster you go, again, a little Mach 1 101. Most of you guys are probably familiar that an aircraft, any aircraft, has 4 forces. You have thrust, you have drag, you've got lift, and you've got gravity, okay? Put those things in balance in steady state flight, and where they all meet is the center of gravity. That's the spot where you could hang a string and the airplane would just hang level, okay? The CG. And what happens is, as you're flying along, the air is flowing over the wings, creating lift. And At one point, you get what's called a center of pressure. Now, if the center of pressure is the exact same spot, that the center of pressure or center of lift, if you like, if that's the exact same spot as your center of gravity, basically your trim would be neutral. Okay, and the airplane just fly along fat, dumb, and happy. When you're full of fuel, the airplane tends to be, depending on how they design it, either a little nose heavy, a little tail heavy, but a lot of times as you burn fuel, the center of gravity will change. That's why fuel tanks are often in the wings, to keep on the center of gravity. Something like a Cessna 172, where you have 2 fuel tanks right above your head in each wing. Doesn't matter how the center of gravity doesn't really change, because it's basically right over the CG. But when you got planes with fuel tanks all over them, you got to be careful where you're burning that fuel and where you're moving it. Now, as you go faster and faster and faster, that center of pressure tends to move aft. Okay? Making the nose. Now you've got the center of pressure picking up back here. The center of gravity hasn't changed. So you've got your CG right here, but the center of lift is moved back a little bit, so it's trying to pull the nose down. They're actually trying to pull the tail up. So you got to give a little aft trim. Well, in this case, it'd be on the elevons. You give a little aft trim to keep the airplane in stasis. There have been some subsonic aircraft, and it's happened to Learjets. It's called Mach tuck. And what happened was, as I understood, the way it was explained to me, was the faster and faster that center pressure starts moving back and back, and they're using more and more up trim. Because remember, the center pressure is pulling up on the airplane, but it's moving rearward, so it's pulling more and more up to the tail. It's trying to force the nose down. So you're using more and more up trim to keep the nose up. Well, apparently these guys went beyond as fast as they were supposed to go, and they ran out of trim. They kept going faster. As one guy said, they hit the go fast button, and the airplane eventually did not have enough up elevator to offset how far back the center of pressure had moved, and the nose fell through, and it's called Mach tuck. And this happens way below Mach 1. But now, obviously, a fighter plane, things with flying tails on them and everything, they're all set up for this. They're engineered for it. But this is one of the reasons subsonic aircraft are limited in speed. Is not necessarily because my airplane has a speed limit of 0.82 Mach, which that's, you go any faster, you hit the barber pole and ding, 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 overspeed. I was told that it has nothing, the airframe can go much faster. The problem is that apparently it's the engine pylons. That's what they're rated for. Other airplanes, it might be they don't have enough up trim on the tail. There's all kinds of reasons. Exceeding your speed limit will not make the airplane fall apart with most aircraft. Okay, now you impose a heavy G factor on it, and that's a different story. But anyway, that's ludicrous speed. So airspeed is life, but just tattoo that to the inside of your eyelids. Airspeed is life. Too much, bad things happen. Too little, bad things happen. I think you're right, TG. I think it did have a single tail on that Lindbergh kit. Gone to plaid. Well, guys, I promised the wife I'd be done before 10 so that we could watch her show. And it's been fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the bit about the dragsters. And I was just thought we'd do talk about something a little bit different. Get out of my wheelhouse and let you guys take controls for a minute. But as always, we got back to airplanes eventually. Oh, part of my evil plan. So, actually, I think in the Galloping Ghost crash, if I remember correctly, he actually had a trim tab failure, I believe. It's a 7-year-old airplane. And he would have had a lot of up trim. And when the trim tab broke, it would have immediately gone one way or the other, and it went up. And if you notice in the photograph, you can't see his head because the G-forces have sucked him down in the cockpit. It would have blacked him out. I mean, even if he was wearing a G-suit and was 19-year-old, it would have, I forget how many G's the FAA anticipated he took, but it was more than a human could take. And of course, and well, we all know how that ended. But I'm pretty sure it was a trim tab failure. And real tragedy, too. Well, guys, that's all I got for tonight. I'll loop the video so you can chat amongst each other for a few minutes. And let's see, is there anything else? No, I'm pretty sure that's it. Well, guys, I want to take care of yourselves. Hope you had a good time. It was really nice for everyone to check in. And we'll see you, I believe. I might be able to do it again next week. Okay? So take care of yourselves and model on.
Well, the hobby store had opened about an hour before. Now I'm staring at a model of an implement of war. Then my hands start to tremble and my heart began to pound. It was the weirdest looking model plane I'd ever found. They don't design them like that anymore. They just don't design them like that anymore. They've been innovating for 100 years. But I'm wondering about some of those engineers. Were they geniuses or were they smoking crack? They put the tails out front and the wings in the back. They don't design them like that anymore. They don't design them like that anymore. And now I wind up buying every single kit. 'Cause you never know if they're gonna reissue it. They don't design them like that anymore. No, they just don't design them like that anymore. They don't design them like that anymore. They just don't design them like that anymore. They just don't. No, they don't. No, no. They don't design them like that anymore. They just don't. No, they don't. No, 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 no. They just don't design them like that anymore.